Hey guys, I miss being with you all tonight. I am in New Mexico, not as I record this, but while you're watching this, I'm in New Mexico with my family for spring break. And so I hope you've met. I hope you are together there and sharing stories with one another. I want to thank you so much for doing this, like doing this adventure with me. I'm learning a lot. I hope you're learning a lot. And one of the things that I hope is happening is that we are getting to integrate spiritual practice with our action in the world. Um, that is really one of the best hopes of this class, this baptized, equipped, sent, is that spiritual practice that deepens us and roots us and helps heal us and make us whole is linked together with our daily living and particularly how we live in the world, a world that's in need, a world where there's evil and where things are broken, and that these feed off of each other, our spiritual practice and our engagement in the community or in the world. And the tradition that we're focusing on, you might have noticed in these spiritual practices, and the one we're looking at tonight is another one, is contemplation, the contemplative Christian tradition. And the contemplative Christian tradition is ancient. It goes back all the way, but it particularly began to be called contemplation after Constantine Church was kind of born, the official empire-led church. There was this offshoot of monasticism where people were like, we want a pure form of Jesus that's not cookie cutter, that isn't as powerful, that isn't as fast food like, that has depth. And that monastic tradition is kind of held on to the contemplative tradition since probably the third and fourth century AD. And so that's what we're going back to. And today we're going to talk about contemplative prayer. Contemplative prayer. And my hope, because contemplative prayer probably seems like the most monastic of all the prayers to me, because it's kind of it's hard, and it's one that I feel like most Christians haven't practiced a lot, and it has kind of a steep learning curve, at least it has for me, but it's deeply connected to our work in the world, especially in a world that is in need of God's love and justice and mercy and goodness. So let me share my screen and we will talk a little bit more about contemplative prayer. I hope this works. Okay, so contemplation and the spiritual practice of contemplative prayer is what we're talking about. And there are some assumptions, theological assumptions behind contemplative prayer that are very important. And I think you probably have some of these assumptions too, but you'll see how contemplative prayer and contemplative spirituality, it starts with this stuff. The first and best news, right, is that God is with us. That like right now in this moment, God is with us, God is active, God is trying to work for good in our own selves and in the world around us, so that at any time there is this invitation, any moment of our day, there is an invitation for us to be a part of God and what God is doing. We live with this standing, generous invitation from God, which is amazing. So, any situation, God's like, okay, I'm here and I'm working. Do you want to be with me? And do you want to work with me? That's one assumption. Number two, the assumption is that our false selves, or sin, we might want to call it sin. The Bible, Paul calls it the flesh, which is not a great word. It kind of threw us for a loop for the last several centuries. But our false selves keep us in a constant state of disunion. So you all know this, right? We are in disunion with our true selves. We're always trying to integrate who we really are with who we aren't really. And we are also in disunion with creation. We're always destroying creation and not living in concert with creation. We're in disunion with God, separated from God, and we're separated from each other. We are not in union with one another. And this is kind of our everyday existence, unfortunately. is this big lie. Because the truth is that we are one with God. We are meant to be one with ourselves, one with each other, one with all of creation. And so we are living and swimming in the false self. And the false self goes beyond just an individual thing. We've created systems, very robust, complicated systems that are based in the false self. So they're based in fear, they're based in greed, they're based in the ego, they're based in competition and tribalism. And these systems surround us, and they have tremendous influence over us and how we operate on a day-to-day basis. So that's the second assumption. The third assumption is that in the midst of this frenzied, very controlling, false self reality that we live in, that God is moving in often subtle and sometimes these kind of secret and hidden, I spelled hidden wrong, hidden ways, right? So God, for whatever reason, does not come out and with a larger or louder attitude and say, I'm bigger than all this false stuff. No, the false self is loud and it's puffed up and it's in your face. And God's movement is often very quiet, and often it's secret and hidden to us. If we're not looking for it, if we're not quiet, we will miss it. So this is a huge assumption of the contemplative tradition. And this is just a really big deal. And that's why we do contemplation. And I'll talk about that in a minute. Fourth assumption, final on this page here. And this is so important because I think there's this attitude with religious people in general that they can be very better than and otherworldly and not focused on this world. But what contemplation really means is that as we become one with God, we are directly becoming one with all things, with creation, with ourselves, and with our neighbor. So real contemplation moves us to deeper compassion. Real contemplation moves us to more courageous action and advocacy and justice fighting. When we are in contemplation, we become more authentic. We become more engaged. We become more able to be in the world in a way that makes a sustained and beautiful difference. And so that is really what contemplation is about. It's not about separating ourselves from the world that is in need. It's about entering into the world more authentically and in more union with God. Okay? So our world needs contemplative action. Our world is desperate for it. One of my favorite quotes is Howard Thurman's when he says, the world needs people who have come alive. The world needs people who have come alive. And contemplation is about recentering ourselves on our union with God and one another. And it's about realizing who we truly are. And it's about rewiring our brains and our hearts so that we engage the world in a particular way. And so when we think about mission, when we think about justice making, when we think about advocacy, when we think about loving our neighbor, all of those things that this class is also about, being more fully alive is how we do that. It's not through neglecting ourselves or neglecting our life with God that we serve humanity or our neighbor. It's through loving God and finding God within that we actually also find God beyond ourselves. Okay? Hope that makes sense. So let me just mention, this is an actual practice. It's called centering prayer or contemplative prayer. Some people just call it sitting prayer. And again, it's hard because it focuses on silence and stillness. And I don't know if you've gotten to know me at all, but silence and stillness are not my best qualities. I don't naturally default into silence and stillness. And so what it helps me to do is become more aware of things. So what you do is you sit. And to me, it's been important in this practice to sit firmly, but comfortably. So I actually have to make sure my spine is engaged and my shoulders are a little bit engaged. Not that I'm like forcing anything. I want to be comfortable, but I don't slouch. I don't lean. I don't kind of lounge, sitting firmly and comfortable in a firm chair. And you can do this in as little as 5 minutes or 20 minutes. Some of the experts go further than that. 20 minutes feels like a long time to sit in silence. And yet, we spend 20 minutes, I do at least, on my phone watching a video or stand-up comic, and that goes by lickety split. And so we have 20 minutes, but are we willing to spend 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes sitting comfortably in silence and stillness? And the goal, if I could even say that, I don't think there is a goal in this. We're trying to receive the gift of God's already presence. So God is already saying, I want to pour out my love and my presence into your life. That's already an assumption of this, right? And what we're trying to do in contemplative prayer is to rest in that, to receive that, to just be there. It's the one thing we do. It's really the one thing we can do that is not about what we do. It's about who we are. It's about just being. Just being. And that is so hard because we have a world that says we are what we do, right? Only if we're busy, only if we're making a difference, only if we're working, only if we're producing, only if we're contributing, only if we're correcting, right? That's the only value we have. And the beginning point is to say, no, actually, who you are matters to God. And God, as you are, wants to pour into you. One of the ways to do this in this little middle section here is to focus on and return to your breath to help you become still. And so taking deep, intentional breaths and just focusing on your breathing. You might have noticed this has become very popular secularly. It's not just a Christian thing, but just sitting and breathing and focusing on your breath. It's been shown that this helps people to calm down. It lowers the stress hormones. It rewires the brain to not be as anxious, to be more grounded and strong. So all of that exists. But what we're trying to do in Christian contemplation is a little different than maybe the Eastern tradition or the kind of secular tradition of meditation. We're not just emptying ourselves of thought, we are receiving love. And so the goal of contemplation is union with God, not just emptiness or separation or what is it? Releasing ourselves of attachments. So focus on and return to your breath. And then a lot of people, including me, like to use a word or a phrase to help keep you centered. So love is a word I like to use. I often say, you are God. So I'll breathe in and go, you are. And as I breathe out, God. Another one of my favorites is, I am yours. I am, as I breathe in, yours, as I breathe out. Or the Lord is my shepherd, or peace on earth. Or, you could choose so many things. Keep it short so that you can fit it into your breath. That's centering prayer. That's centering prayer. And you're thinking maybe, okay, what does this do? How does it work? Well, there's a couple of reminders. And again, this is from my perspective. There may be others in the class who practice this and have other words about it. But for me, what this is like is I feel like I have to pass through tons of thoughts and feelings to reach God and to reach my true self. So when I'm silent and when I'm still, or when I try to be, I become just absolutely inundated with to-do lists and memories. And oh my gosh, I forgot to do this. And what does that person think of me? And oh no, I'm anxious about X, Y, or Z. And so my false self, this frenzy of anxiety and fear and ego protection is just constantly trying to keep me in disunion. And because it's trying to protect itself, it's not trying to keep me from God, it's trying to keep me protected in a weird world. And I feel like I have to pass through that. It's like letting stillness and silence kind of move through that. And often, maybe even for just a moment, I will actually get quiet and still and just receive the gift of God's love. But it also helps me really be aware of my false self. And what happens is that the prayer of contemplation, the felt outcome of it. So what I mean by that is, like, when we pray, there's a release. When I pray out loud, or you pray out loud, sometimes there's actually, again, our hormones are engaged, our hope, our stress gets released. And we feel in the minute of the prayer or in worship or when a song is sung that it feels good, right? It physically and emotionally feels good. Oftentimes with silent prayer, this is delayed because stuff is happening beneath the surface. And what I have found is in the practice of contemplative prayer, we become more present to others, to God, and to our authentic selves in daily life. And so after that prayer time, just very subtly, I am more awake. I am more aware. I am more my true self. I'm rewired. My sense of reality has shifted to be more true and more based in the love and presence of God. Again, very subtly sometimes, but it's powerful and it changes me. And I become then someone who can be on mission, be active in the world, fighting injustice, um, uh, confronting the powers that be in a way that is not only more sustainable for me and courageous, but more effective in the world because I am more grounded and I'm not acting out of my ego. I'm not acting out of my fear, my anxiety. I'm acting out of more of my true self. I hope this makes sense. I hope this makes sense. So that is the lesson today on the spiritual practice of contemplative prayer. And I hope that it makes sense. I hope it's been a blessing. And yeah, I look forward to hearing you guys talk about it some more and practicing it this week. I really look forward to seeing if even one of you practices 5 minutes, what that means to you and how you experience it. And I mean, to me, I've been a part of the church my whole life, and I've had too few groups that practice this together and talk about it and become better at students, right? It's a practice. So I hope you have a chance to practice it going into this upcoming week. Again, I'm sorry I'm not there, and I hope you are having a wonderful time together. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Bye.